heard today.
Brian Marjoram was prosecuted for manslaughter in Germany but escaped with a fine. His coach carrying students from Norfolk hit a lorry which had just struck a coach carrying pupils from a school in Suffolk. 3 people on board the coaches died. Malcolm Robertson reports.
For relatives of the victims of the German motorway pile-up, it's been a long and painful wait. 3.5 years since the incident, the inquest has taken place in Great Yarmouth. It's a tragic irony that pupils and staff from 2 schools in our region travelling in separate coaches should have been caught up in the horror. Those that died: Stuart Dines, a 14-year-old schoolboy from Woodbridge, Jane Irving, the school secretary at Norwich School, and Ron Lees, co-driver on the Norwich School bus, but a passenger at the time. Students from Thomas Mills High School in Framlingham and Norwich School were on their way to ski resorts at Womp and Schladming in Austria. The bus carrying the students from Suffolk suffered a puncture on the A4 autobahn near Cologne. While on the hard shoulder, it was struck by a lorry that shunted it into a field. Shortly afterwards, the coach with the Norwich School students on board hit the lorry. Stephen Gibbons, director of sport at Norwich School, said he had concerns about the driver Brian Marjoram, who'd got lost in Brussels. He told Mr Marjoram to look out when he spotted a lorry across the motorway, but there was no response. A statement from Brian Marjoram was read out to the inquest. He's unwell and has been unable to work since the accident. He said he was aware of a red warning triangle on the hard shoulder of the autobahn, and within seconds he saw the lorry across the road without any lights on it, but he was unable to avoid it. PC Simon Hall said Mr Marjoram had reached the limit of 4.5 hours he should have been driving and was surprised he hadn't stopped to take a break.
It would be reasonable to say that he perhaps could have reacted sooner to the blockage in the road, and if he had reacted sooner, there was ample time for him to stop without a collision.
Mr Marjoram, who worked for Ambassador Travel in Yarmouth, was prosecuted in Germany for manslaughter and fined. The lorry driver was jailed. In the case of Stuart Dines, on the bus hit by the lorry, the coroner recorded a verdict of unlawful killing.
Safety procedures could have been better, they believe, and they hope that as a result of this, that these will be implemented in the future and nobody will lose their lives again.
Verdicts of accidental death were recorded on Jane Irving and Ron Lees, passengers on the coach that struck the lorry. Malcolm Robertson, Anglia News.
A disqualified driver who killed 2 women in Ipswich by crashing into them while he was drunk and on drugs was jailed for 8 years today. 26-year-old Emma Harold and her 25-year-old friend Kate Wazalook was killed instantly in the crash in February this year as they were walking home from a night out. 20-year-old Scott Nichols from Corston in Norfolk admitted causing death by dangerous driving. Another woman who was hit by his car is still in a wheelchair.
The Ministry of Defence has admitted the RAF search and rescue helicopter in Suffolk hasn't been permanently available over the summer. The helicopter, which is based at Wattisham Airfield, wasn't operating at nights for the first 2 weeks in August. But an MOD statement says 24-hour cover was provided from another base in Yorkshire.
Next, the huge backlog of posts that union leaders claim is sitting in a sorting office after a series of strikes.
The Communication Workers Union says 500,000 items remain undelivered at the Peterborough office. Now, Royal Mail has urged them to stop hurting customers and call off their strikes. Rhiannon Mills reports.
If you're waiting for a birthday card, maybe a bill or even a cheque, they could be hidden in here, a mountain of mail. These photos were taken inside just one room of a depot in Peterborough, cage after cage of undelivered post, building up after a series of strikes by staff at Royal Mail.
The current backlog will mean that the mail in the Peterborough area will be delayed for a considerable amount of time. Obviously, we regret this, but the position that we're in with the business at the moment makes the action that we've taken absolutely essential.
This summer there have been walkouts in Cambridgeshire, Essex and Northamptonshire, with both sides refusing to back down over pay and new working arrangements. But it's not just hurting them. The CWU say they've got around 500,000 letters and parcels still waiting to be delivered here in Peterborough. In London, they've got over 20 million of them, leading to the biggest backlog of posts that they've seen since the national strike back in 2007. Ian Crichton runs a car dealership just half a mile from a depot in Peterborough. He's also chairman of the city's Chamber of Commerce. He says for many businesses, the impact of the strikes has been worse than expected.
The obvious one, how many cheques are sat there that we can't get our hands on, so cash flow can be impacted by it. But in terms of operating the business, we have quite a good example of a customer who unfortunately lost his keys. We ordered some new keys, and they disappeared into this postal void.
The Royal Mail today called on the Communication Workers Union to stop hurting customers. They said it's now more clear than ever that the CWU is focusing all its efforts on strike action and political posturing. Their claimed support for change is no more than lip service, but their determination to damage services and undermine the future health of the business and the universal service is increasing. With the union confirming today that they are going to vote on a national strike and more walkouts planned in places like Cambridge and Ely next week, there's little doubt that it could continue to be a postcode lottery as to whether your mail gets to beat the backlog. Rhiannon Mills, Anglia News in Peterborough.
Well, it's 16 minutes past 6. This is Anglia Tonight.
Stay with us. Here's what's still to come.
More news now from Suffolk, Essex and Norfolk. People living close to Stansted Airport have met to discuss increased noise levels generated by planes.
People from the villages of Hatfield, Heath, Hatfield, Broad Oak and Great and Little Hallingbury met up last night. They're upset that planes have started to fly lower for longer after takeoff. The airlines say it saves fuel and is better for the environment. But Stansted Airport says it takes the noise complaints very seriously. Extra police were called to Great Yarmouth Magistrates Court this morning after a man became violent in a holding cell. He smashed the glass in the cell door and caused other damage before officers eventually restrained him using a taser gun. He was then transferred back to Norwich Prison.
A demolition company from Suffolk has gone into administration with the loss of 46 jobs. CDC Demolition, which is based at Waldringfield near Woodbridge, blamed its difficulties on cash flow problems relating to a major contract. Administrators have been called in and the entire workforce have lost their jobs.
The head teacher of a school for children with severe disabilities says she's angry that the school won't get a new building it badly needs.
Karen Heath says Chapel Road School in Attleborough is ill-equipped and lacks the space needed to teach and care for the children who attend it. Alpa Patel reports.
Cramped, inadequate and inefficient. And these are not just the opinions of staff who work here at Chapel Road School in Attleborough. In past reports, Ofsted has judged the school to be outstanding, but has heavily criticised the suitability of the site.
Look at the width of this corridor. We have wheelchairs going in, quite large groups walking through here. It is far too narrow. We have an issue around specific resources for our children. We should have a big room for a ball pool and a sensory room and a soft play room. We don't have that. We have to do it in a corridor. We have storage issues at the same time. We need our buggies and wheelchairs close by. It is very cramped and not safe.
And so when it was announced that the school may be eligible for a rebuild under a government project, there was great excitement. That was until last Friday, when the school was told it was no longer eligible for cash because a suitable location was not available. Karen says staff and parents tried to find a site but got no support from Norfolk County Council. In a statement, the council say they recognise the decision is desperately disappointing for the school. The County Council is urgently considering other options for providing the school with the buildings it needs and deserves. Over the past few years, the school says it has been turning dozens of physically and mentally disabled children away due to the lack of space. And that's why Karen and her colleagues say they'll fight on for those who desperately need their support. Alpa Patel, Anglia News, Attleborough in Norfolk.